Sometimes the internet decides the fate of a firearm before it even has a fair chance to prove itself. A wave of early reviews, a few strong opinions, and suddenly the story gets written: this gun is either the next big thing or it's dead on arrival. That's exactly what happened with the Smith Wesson CSX. When it launched, there was buzz, there was skepticism, and within weeks it became one of the most debated handguns in recent memory. Some even said it was the gun the internet tried to cancel. But the story isn't that simple. The CSX wasn't just another polymer striker-fired pistol, of which the market already had plenty. It was a bold experiment, a return to a classic formula in a modern package. A micro-compact, metal-framed, single-action 9mm pistol with ambidextrous controls and a manual safety. To shooters who grew up admiring the Colt 1911, the design felt familiar yet fresh, like something that reached back to tradition while still trying to fit the realities of concealed carry in the 2020s. The year was 2022. Smith & Wesson unveiled the CSX at the SHOT Show, and for a moment it looked like they had found a niche others had overlooked. The gun weighed just over 21 ounces, about the same as an old detective special revolver, but chambered in 9mm with capacities ranging from 10 to 12 rounds. For those who wanted a carry pistol with the feel of steel rather than polymer, the CSX seemed like an answer. At first, coverage was mixed but hopeful. Some reviewers liked the ergonomics and praised Smith & Wesson for daring to go against the grain. Others noticed quirks right away, especially with the trigger. And in the age of YouTube reviews and online forums, quirks can quickly become deal breakers. Within months, the CSX found itself in the middle of a storm. Influential reviewers said the design was flawed. Videos circulated criticizing its reliability, and memes spread labeling it a failed experiment. The main sticking point was the trigger reset. If you shot the CSX like many shooters do, riding the reset lightly after each shot, you could end up with what seemed like a dead trigger. The click you felt wasn't the sear resetting, but the firing pin safety engaging. To those who relied on a short, tactile reset for rapid fire, this felt like a serious flaw. A couple of respected voices on the internet hammered this point, and once those videos spread, the reputation of CSX started to slide. Yet here's the twist: not everyone had that issue. For shooters who let the trigger travel fully forward, the gun ran smoothly. There were no malfunctions, no dead triggers, no surprises. It was a matter of technique, not necessarily a matter of broken design, but perception is everything, and in firearms culture especially. Once the word spreads that a gun is finicky, it's almost impossible to undo that first impression. It's worth remembering the environment of the handgun market at that time. Micro-compacts like the Sig Sauer P365 and Springfield Hellcat were dominating headlines. These pistols offered high capacity and small frames, easy handling, and they rode the momentum of the striker-fired trend. Against that backdrop, the CSX stood out precisely because it wasn't striker-fired. It required cocked and locked carry, a manual safety, and a shooting style closer to a 1911 than to the Glock family. To traditionalists, that was a welcome option. To newer shooters raised on striker pistols, it looked outdated and unnecessarily complicated. And that tension is what drove the split reaction. Enthusiasts who loved the 1911 lineage saw the CSX as a breath of fresh air, finally a company willing to give them a carry gun that felt like what they trained on decades ago. Internet reviewers focused on the mechanics of the reset and dismissed it as flawed. Social media amplified the negative voices more than the positive ones, and soon the gun carried a reputation for being unreliable, even if many owners had perfectly good experiences with it. This is the part of the story that fascinates me most. The CSX wasn't really killed by its design. It was killed by the way people talked about it online. Opinions hardened, reputations formed, and even those who had never fired a single round through the pistol felt they already knew enough to judge it. When we talk about why the CSX created such divided opinions, we can't avoid the subject of the trigger. At first glance, it seemed like a well-executed single-action system. The pull weight hovered in the 6 to 7 pound range, consistent and crisp, with the safety engaged just like a 1911. On paper, it was solid, but paper doesn't tell the whole story. The real issue came down to the way people actually shoot under pressure. Many shooters like to ride the reset. That means instead of letting the trigger return all the way forward, they let it out only far enough to feel or hear the little click that signals the sear has reset. It's a fast way to shoot, especially when you're trained for speed and efficiency. The problem with the CSX was that the click you felt at that halfway point wasn't the sear at all. It was the firing pin block disengaging. Pull the trigger from there and nothing happens. The result is what felt like a dead trigger, right in the middle of a string of fire. For shooters used to striker-fired pistols or certain single actions, this was infuriating. They felt the reset, pressed, and the gun didn't respond. Online siumya. Those moments turned into headlines. Videos showed shooters frustrated, struggling to keep a rhythm, sometimes stopping mid-string to tap the trigger in disbelief. And once that image spread, it became the defining narrative of CSX. But here's the thing, the gun wasn't broken. It was just designed with a different shooting method in mind. If you let the trigger come fully forward, every time, the CSX cycled reliably. In fact, some trainers argue this is a safer and more stress-resistant method. Under real defensive conditions, fine motor control deteriorates, vasoconstriction sets in, blood flow to the fingers drops, and those tiny tactile resets can be harder to feel. By letting the trigger travel fully forward, what some call a trigger weld technique, you avoid missing the reset altogether. It's slower on the range stopwatch, perhaps, but in a fight it can be more dependable. That's why opinions split so sharply. If you were a shooter trained to ride the reset, the CSX felt clunky, even defective. If you were trained to let it go forward, you didn't notice a problem at all. Same gun, two very different experiences. This leads into why the CSX actually made sense for concealed carry. At just over 21 ounces, it fell into the sweet spot, light enough to disappear in a waistband or even a pocket holster, but heavy enough to soak up recoil better than many polymer micro-compacts. Its profile was streamlined, with an angled rear that reduced snagging during the draw. In side-by-side comparisons with blockier striker pistols, that sleek back end made a difference when pulling from tight clothing or trouser pockets. Capacity was another selling point. Where the classic revolver gave you 6 shots of .38 special, the CSX delivered up to 12 rounds of 9mm in a nearly identical weight class. For many who still appreciated the feel of a metal gun but wanted modern firepower, this was compelling. Add in ambidextrous safeties and slide stops, and you had a pistol designed to accommodate a wide range of shooters. Still, Smith Wesson heard the complaints. The company has a long history of adjusting to customer feedback, and by 2025, they introduced the CSX E-Series. This wasn't a minor tweak, it was a meaningful response to the internet storm. The most important fix was the trigger reset. On the E-Series, shooters could finally ride the reset without fear of a dead trigger. The tactile point now corresponded to the actual sear engagement. Just like most semi-autos on the market, that change alone addressed the single biggest complaint reviewers had voiced since 2022. Beyond that, Smith Wesson expanded the line. The original 3.1-inch barrel version remained, but they added a 3.6-inch option for those who wanted a slightly longer sight radius and improved ballistics. Both versions still kept the compact frame, meaning you could choose depending on whether deep concealment or enhanced performance was your priority. They also included higher capacity magazines. In addition to the standard 10 and 12-round options, the E-Series offered 15 and even 17-round mags with grip sleeves to maintain ergonomics. This flexibility meant you could carry small and light during the day, then swap to a full-size magazine when concealment wasn't an issue, say, at home or traveling. The controls stayed ambidextrous, the ergonomics remained strong, and the weight was nearly identical. The difference was refinement. By fixing the reset, offering barrel choices, and expanding magazine options, the E-Series made clear that Smith & Wesson hadn't abandoned the CSX concept despite the online criticism. Instead, they doubled down, listened to shooters, and came back with something that directly addressed concerns. By this point, the CSX story had shifted. What started as a gun canceled by the internet evolved into a case study of how manufacturers can respond to feedback. The E-Series gave the CSX a second life, one that carried it into serious competition with the likes of the Sig Sauer P365 Springfield Hellcat and Glock 43X. Performance with ammunition is where the CSX proved itself more capable than many expected. For a pistol with such a short barrel, it handled a wide range of 9mm loads with surprising consistency. Standard pressure rounds cycled flawlessly, but the real test came with hotter +P and +P+ ammunition. These loads are designed to boost velocity, improving expansion when fired from short barrels. Many compact pistols struggle here because the faster slide velocity can outrun the magazine spring, leading to failures to feed, Yet in testing, the CSX showed it could keep up. One standout load was the Winchester 127 Grain Ranger T+P+, which clocks around 12 and 50 feet per second from a service-length pistol. In something as small as the CSX, you would expect sharp recoil and potential malfunctions. Instead, the pistol absorbed the recoil surprisingly well, and malfunctions were virtually non-existent. The narrow, lightweight slide had just enough mass to manage the pressure while still maintaining reliability. For defensive shooters who insist on carrying high-performance ammunition, that is an important point. It demonstrated that the CSX was not fragile, but rather robust enough to handle the demands of real-world self-defense use. Recoil management also deserves attention. Many shooters assume a 21-ounce gun will be unpleasant to shoot with heavy loads, but the ergonomics of the CSX help control muzzle rise. The grip angle and ambidextrous safeties provide natural indexing, while the metal frame dampens some of the snap that polymer pistols of similar size deliver. Rapid follow-up shots felt controlled, and even after extended range sessions, fatigue was minimal compared to ultralight carry guns. Reliability across high round counts is another critical factor. A micro-compact that fails every few magazines quickly becomes an expensive paperweight. Reports from owners who put hundreds of rounds through the CSX found consistent reliability. Even after long practice sessions, malfunctions were rare. This performance placed it on par with the market leaders of its class. Comparisons were inevitable. Against the Sig Sauer P365, the Springfield Hellcat, and the Glock 43X, the CSX competed directly. Each of those models brought striker-fired simplicity and established reputations, yet the CSX offered something different. The single-action system appealed to shooters comfortable with cocked and locked carry, while the all-metal frame stood apart in a sea of polymer. It was never intended to replace the striker-fired giants, but to give shooters another option, one rooted in tradition but executed with modern practicality. Magazines became part of the conversation too. The original 10-round design worked, but fully loading it created some resistance when seating with the slide forward. The solution for many was simple download by one, carrying 9 instead of 10 to guarantee smooth reloads under pressure. The larger 12-round magazines eased this problem, and with the release of the E-Series, 15 and 17-round options expanded the platform's flexibility. With sleeves to match grip dimensions, those larger mags offered the best of both worlds: concealability with a short mag in public, and extended firepower when concealment was irrelevant, such as at home or at the range. The pricing of the CSX positioned it directly against its rivals. With a suggested retail price of around $699, it fell into the same bracket as the P365 and Hellcat, and slightly above some Glock offerings. For what it delivered: ambidextrous controls, a metal frame, competitive capacity, and strong reliability. The value proposition was fair. Many buyers who wanted something different than the mainstream found the price entirely justified. All of this comes together to illustrate a broader point. Internet criticism can shape perception quickly, and once a gun is labeled as flawed, it often carries that stigma indefinitely. Yet the CSX proves that reality can differ from reputation. In real-world use, it performed reliably, carried comfortably, and offered shooters a distinctive alternative to the polymer norm. With the release of the E-Series, Smith & Wesson showed that it was willing to listen, adapt, and refine the design based on user feedback. The result was not just a second chance, but a reinvention. Closing the chapter on the CSX, the takeaway is simple. No firearm should be judged solely by headlines, memes, or even a handful of critical reviews. First-hand experience tells the real story. Range time, defensive drills, and daily carry are what reveal whether a pistol earns trust. For many, CSX did exactly that, overcoming the noise of internet criticism to become a trusted companion. The E-Series cemented that position, proving that sometimes a firearm once written off can come back stronger than before.